This interview is being conducted on the afternoon of February 4th, 1983, at the University of Michigan Dearborn campus. Could you tell me your name, please?
My name is Nathan Roth.
And where you're from?
I am from Veliky Bereznyy, Czechoslovakia.
Where were you during the war years?
During the early war years, I was in Veliky Bereznyy, and then I went to Budapest. From Budapest, I came back home when the Germans moved into our part of the country, and we were deported to a camp in Ungvár. And from Ungvár, we went to Auschwitz. And from Auschwitz to Jaworzno. And from Jaworzno, we were evacuated at the end of the war, and during the evacuation, I escaped and made my way back to Ungvár.
Okay. Let's start with your life before the war. Tell me something about Veliky Bereznyy, what you remember about your life in that town before the war started.
It was a very serene town. I went to cheder, which is like the lower school where you learn the Aleph base. There I went to yeshiva, first in Bereznyy, where the Dayan had a yeshiva, and from there I went to Munkac, to a yeshiva. And
let me interrupt for a minute. Did you also went to public school?
yes, I went to public school. I went to yeshiva. I started at 5 o'clock in the morning to cheder and yeshiva, and then at 1 o'clock went to public school until 5:30.
With Jews and non-Jews?
With Jews and non-Jews. And then after public school, we went back to cheder or to yeshiva until 7:30 in the evening. So basically the day consisted from 5 o'clock in the morning until 7:30 in the evening when I got back home. That was every day except Friday. Friday you came home at noon. And I just remembered something that on the way home from cheder home, I stopped by at my older sister's house where she had freshly baked kakos, and always had a treat over there before going home Friday afternoon. It just came to my mind.
How large was your family?
There was 8 of us. Sister was the oldest. I was the youngest.
8 children?
8 children. 4 brothers, 4 sisters. Father, mother. That was the family, the basic family.
Grandparents?
I had a grandfather who lived in a house, as far as I can remember. I never remember a grandmother or the other grandfather, but the grandfather, as far as I can remember, was an invalid and lived in our house. Lived in the main room, what we call the main room. His bed was over there. And in the morning when I got up, he was sitting in his talis doing his shachris by himself. And as a kid, I remember trying to play hooky from cheder so I can stay and have his breakfast with him. I played sick so I can stay with my grandfather and enjoy watching him davening and having his breakfast that my mother made a special soup for him. And, it was usually a soup. It was called an angebrandte soup. I don't know what the equivalent would be here. It just enjoyed being with him. He taught me a lot of things, talked to me all the time. I helped him go. At that time, we didn't have a bathroom in the house yet. It was right at the end of the veranda. I helped him go to the bathroom after the breakfast, conducted him. It was just very pleasant memories.
Was he alive when the Nazis came?
I was already in Budapest, and he was still alive. When I came back, I found out that about 4 days before the Nazis came for the roundup, he died. He was buried at the Bereznyy cemetery. I am not sure, but I don't think that there was time to erect a grave marker. So even if I went back today, I'm not sure if I could find out where he was buried, because it was just a few days before we were taken away that he died. Very old man. He must have been, my God, he must have been 90 if he was a day.
Now, how large was the rest of the family, extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins?
Okay. The oldest sister, Esther, had 3 children. One survived. He's now in Israel. Ari, that's...
Sure, the picture.
That's him right here. He hid his family through the war in bunkers in Slovakia. His whole family, 3 children in another family, survived by going into the forest, giving money for some peasants to hide them, to bring them food. And they survived the whole war. And right after the war, they went to Israel, where all 3 children flourished. And now they have an extended family over there. There are one of his children has got 9 children, one has 2, and the other one has 2, so that's 11, that's 13 children, and I just attended a wedding of the first of his grandchildren. Although one has already married before, which I did not attend, but I just attended a wedding of the first of his children. And this is a wedding of the family when they were still living in Slovakia, in the beginning where they had to wear the stars. And this is the wedding I just attended.
What a contrast. What about the rest of your brothers and sisters?
That's the brother, that's 2. There's another sister. Can I put this up here?
Sure.
This sister had 2 children, her husband, and none of them came back. This sister had 3 children. There's a story in this sister. She married, her husband comes from where my brother lived in Slovakia. And because the part we were living in, which was Hungary, because he was from Slovakia, they were deported in 1941. They were just taken away from the house and taken to an area in southern Ukraine where people were just killed. The Hungarian and the Germans and the Ukrainian militia, they just had it was free for all. They just killed them. But our family mounted a expedition. We hired a Hungarian officer, gave him a lot of money, and he went back into that area and searched with her husband and found them, both her and the children. My sister made it back, and the children made it back, but her husband was killed in the process. And she stayed for another 2 years until they were rounded up with me together, and they still perished later on.
So she didn't survive?
She didn't survive, no. Neither did the children. So she had 3 children, husband, and they were brought back from the brink to our efforts. This sister, she was my favorite. Her two children didn't make it. Now there was another sister who is alive in Dallas. She's doing fine. And me. So there were Etu, Rosie, Minju, and oh, there was a brother. There was a brother. He also had two children. His wife's name was Bessie. They didn't make it. And my mother, there is no picture of survived, not even a picture of her. We have no picture, not even my brother in Israel. And we searched, and there is not a picture available of my mother. My father, yes, there is one. I have one at home on the wall, because my brother had it in Slovakia. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that. But from my brother Abu and from my mother, there's no picture available. And then there was this brother who didn't come back. It's very interesting. He was drafted into the so-called Hungarian army work battalions maybe a year before the roundup of the Jews. And he came back 2 weeks before. I don't know if I told you that the last time. He came back 2 weeks before, a totally destroyed, sick person. Sick. Home. And when they were rounding us up, we thought that he will get special treatment after all. He was in the work battalions of the army, so to speak. He was the first to go. Just like any other healthy person. Didn't give him a stretcher, he couldn't walk. Then he had a wife. I think I had a picture of his wife someplace here. He had a wife, also 3 children, and none of those came back.
Tell me about this tombstone here.
My brother, this one, just passed away less than 2 years ago in Israel. And he had this all set. This is his tombstone. And on the bottom here, the tombstone is up here. And here he had, it's a lid to cover his grave. He had listed all of our brothers and sisters and mother who perished in the concentration camp. You want me to read it?
Yes.
Sion lenefesh shenispu b'shoah. Remembrance to the souls who perished in the Holocaust. Imi, my mother's, Sarah Rivka, Bas Avraham Abba Cohen. And that is the father of my mother, who is also buried over there. And then he goes on to list Achoti, my sister, Esther, Ubala, Yehuda, Vialdehem.
And children?
That's my sister, Esther, and her husband, Yehuda, Vialdehem, except for one. That's the one that I showed you. This is the one who survived. It's one of the children, Esther and Yehuda. And he also is sprouting a whole new family in Israel. And then there is Achoti, my sister, Rezel, Ubala, Yankov, Yaldehem. And this is, where's Rezel?
I think that's all I have.
Oh, here. This is Rezel. And Achi Shlomo ve'ishto Hinda v'yaldehem. And this is Shlomo. And Achoti Mendel. My sister Mendel, Ubala Mendel. His name was Mendel, her name was Mendel, his name was Mendel v'yaldehem. And this is Mendel. and Achi Avraham. And that's the one we don't have a picture of. Abba. Avraham Abba, Ishto, Pessi. Her name was Pessi. Vialdehem.
Vialdehem means children.
Means children. Children.
How many do you think that in the immediate family does that represent?
Okay. Ed, you had 3, 1 survived, that's 2. Ming, you had 3, that's 5. Rosie had 3, that's 8. And Abu had 2, that's 10. Who did leave out Shlomi? Shlomi had 2, that's 12 of their children.
Plus the parents.
Plus the parents.
All right, let me ask you a little bit more. Tell me more about your family. You didn't mention your father.
My father was a lawyer. At that time, you didn't have to be a doctor to be a lawyer. You worked under a doctor, a lawyer. He was an attorney. He worked for one, if I remember, his name was Dr. Munk. He was an attorney. He tried cases in I remember the Okresny something, the court that was right next to the building where his office was. And he was a World War I veteran. There was a picture of him sitting going up to the northern front, just as clear as I can still see it, sitting in the open door of a car with his feet dangling and his rifle over his shoulder. I don't know, I couldn't date it as far as the year, but it was between 14 and 18. He's a very soft-spoken person, very quiet. I was his apple of the eye, of course. Found out that later when I happened to slip on ice and split my head here and started bleeding, and my mother told me never to do that again because my father he had high blood pressure and he shouldn't get excited because he was very protective of me. But he died before I was bar mitzvah. He died at home. He died of a stroke.
What year was it?
I think it was 37.
So before the Hungarian scheme?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was before. He died 37, and he was 53. He was 53 at that time. In fact, I wish I had it here. I should have come a little more prepared. But there is an existence now, a diary of a mohel. I don't know if I told you about that. You know, a mohel. A mohel is a man who circumcises. There's a diary that stretches from 2 or 3 generations for 100 years. It's in existence now, here. In fact, Zvi Steiger has it. I don't know if you ever met Zvi Steiger. You know Zvi Steiger. He has it. I have a copy of it, a Xerox copy of it. But that stretches for over 100 years, 3 generations of mohels. Every person who was circumcised is entered over there. And my father and my grandfather is in that diary. Exactly when, where, who the sandik was. You know what a sandik is? The guy who holds the baby. Who the sandik was, who the mother was, and who the mohel was, of course, and where it was performed.
Yes, just to get a flavor of what your house is. Tell me what a Friday night might have been like at your house.
Friday night, we went out, of course, as I said, there were 3. There was a klos, there was a shul, and there was a besamidrash. We went to the klos, there was the ultra chnakish, and there was the kind of medium, and then there was the more modern, but it was all Orthodox. And we went to the medium type of congregation. And we went and, I remember my father's seat where he sat. And of course, the services were formed, and then you went to the back and picked up the orchim.
What's that?
The strangers you had to pick up a stranger, bring to the house. You usually had at least 1, maybe 2. But you had to bring a stranger to the house for the Shabbos. stayed and he slept there, he ate. He became a part of the family for that weekend. And when we came home, we sang the Shalom Aleichem. And unlike here, there was 4 or 5 or 6 other preliminary melodies that were chanted. And the meal. Let's see, the table was usually full. It was a big table. And of course all the children were there, and guests, not strangers. Orchim means guests. Probably usually 10 at the table, 12. Mother served the meals. The sisters helped. I didn't have to do anything. I was there. And then after the meal, there were a lot of songs. And if I remember, the highlight was, and he already married, because after all, he is 20 years older than I was. He used to come for visits every 2 months or so. And he led the singing. And that was the highlight of the Friday evening deals when he came back. Ari, and had a good voice. Good voice. Knew all the songs that Father. In fact, when we were in Israel 3 years ago, when he was still alive, Olaf Shalom, he made me a cassette of all these songs, which I have. Next day, walking. Oh, after the meal, we used to walk to my older sister's house. They're not here. I don't have her picture, but that's his mother's house. And like for dessert. At that time, walking a mile was nothing. You know, you didn't have cars. You didn't drive. You just walked. And
the whole family walked?
The whole family walked.
Let me ask you this. There are all 10 people walking. Do you remember any incidents of anti-Semitism?
Oh, no. Never. With me, I had some, when I was growing up, there was a couple of Gentile boys in the neighborhood who used to throw rocks and stuff like that, but it was just no more than pranks. It wasn't per se. Not that it wasn't anti-Semitism. There was, because there was. Because they were very devout Christians. And the Jew was perceived as the Christ killer, So there was, but not walking at night, no way, no. There was no problem at all.
Did your father have any dealings with non-Jews?
Oh, only, practically.
So he was well known in the community?
He was well known, and he was also elected to, I know that only from my older sisters, he was also elected to the city council, the village council, if you want to call it.
Now, how large a town was?
2,000.
And of
2,500.
Of that, how many were Jews?
Of that, at least half, maybe 800, maybe 1,000 Jews.
And this was Czechoslovakia at the time?
Czechoslovakia at that time. It was the eastern province of Czechoslovakia.
All right, Tom, what's the first changes you remember taking place because of the war in your town?
Oh, the first changes was when the Czechs abandoned and the Hungarians came in.
When was that?
That was in 38 or 39.
38.
And one of my brothers, this one, had a store, like a small grocery deli and that kind of a thing. And he had to get the store under a Christian's name. He had to hire a front for the store because the license was revoked. Jews could not have a store. I remember that. And I remember even the woman from across the street whose name went up on the store. I remember how she looked. I forgot her name. And her name was on the store. She had to be there. She had to be. In fact, she became a partner in the store without having to invest any.
You said you went to Budapest shortly after.
Okay. I went to Budapest right after that, after the Hungarians came in. First, I tried to stay there. And then it was decided that I should go to Budapest because I was accepted into one of the, I wish I had that picture here. I showed it to you. In one of the, it would be like a dormitory where you work during the day, you study the Talmud at night. And I became an apprentice in a sheet metal shop. And I went to work every day by the streetcar, number 7, I remember. And came back, did the prayers, and then we did 2.5 hours of study the Gemara, the Talmud, and at dinner, which was cooked on the premises. Now I might interject here, which I don't know if I. My sister, this one that we brought back from the brink of death, she was illegally back. She couldn't stay with us in the house, so I got her a job at this dormitory that was sponsored by the Jewish community of Budapest. And she was a cook over there. My sister. She cooked under a different name, and
She had false papers?
She had false papers, yeah. She worked there, but I can't remember yet. The kids, I think, were with her too. Yes. I remember the apartment where they lived with another woman. In fact, I have a picture of her already in Budapest at home.
How long were you in Budapest?
2 years, 2.5 years.
And why did you leave?
I didn't. Well, when I heard, when the Germans took over all of Hungary, they moved into Budapest. Now, I could have stayed in Budapest, and perhaps I would have gotten into this Wallenberg's thing. Oh, my other sister, the one who's surviving now in Dallas, was also in Budapest at that time. She also was living in Budapest at that time. She was working in a store.
Did you know about Wallenberg's?
No. No. Doing that in retrospect. When I heard that they're taking away people from where I lived, I went on a train immediately. Caught a train and went home with my sister. It wasn't the right thing to do, perhaps, but you want to go where your family is because you don't think what is going to happen. So I went home. I remember I had a hell of a time with my sister. I had no problem because I was very blonde, but they were already pulling Jews off the train then. But my sister had a problem. I had no problem. I was very light blonde, very light. Passed for anything.
This is in 1944?
This is 44 in February or so.
So you went back home. Then what happened?
When I got back home, let's see, quarantine was already on. Jews cannot leave the house. Never mind that you don't have food or anything. Jews cannot leave the house anymore. I got home probably within a week before we were rounded up. One night when I kind of sensed what was happening. One night I walked out the backyard. We had a big house. We had a huge house. It was a L-shaped house. I would say the front of it was 100 feet, 80 to 100 feet. And the L going back was the same way, and it had a veranda running across the inside, the other side of the house. There was a big yard, big garden, big field, up to a creek, and then up the mountains. And I heard there were some partisans, guerrillas, you know, in the mountains already. So I went out one night, and I made it all the way up to the mountains. Nobody stopped me, although the orders were Jews do not leave the house, the loudspeakers going all the way up and down. But I made it. I made it up in the mountains, way up. Walked for almost 4 hours. And why I decided to come back, I don't know. But I came back before daylight. Made it way up, almost to a mountain that I heard that's where they were around. But I came back. And then we were rounded up. It was on a Shabbos. We had to leave the house. We were standing in front of the house until everybody else was in front of the house before they said, okay, start marching. And we were taken to the big shul. That was the first temporary detention center. The one that was I think it might have been Ashkenazi. Yeah, the other two were Sephardic, but this one was Ashkenazi. But interestingly enough, all three shuls only had one rabbi. There was only one rabbi for the whole. He did the swing, came here, there, and there, but it was only one rabbi, one Marad Atra, one rabbi of the who was legally empowered to what they call paskin shalas, to resolve disputes of kashrut and stuff like that.
The whole Jewish community was sent to this one place?
Yes. The whole Jewish community was sent to this one shul. I remember there was barbed wire fence around it. I remember the place where I slept for a few nights. I forgot whether it was a week or 6 days or 4 days. I remember the round we were starting to go to the railroad station. I remember that, but I don't remember how long we were staying in that shul.
What were you thinking about?
Escape. What am I doing here? What's happening? But the family was there, so.
Who was with it? Your sister?
My mother, these two sisters, their husbands, the sister who's in Dallas, the sick brother who couldn't sit up practically, the kids, 20, 25, I don't know.
You remember anything specific in that, while you were confined to that one place?
I remember the only thing that I went to the outhouses, which were in the back, and there was a big drop towards the river. The only thing I remember is starting to slide down and wanting to go and coming back. I don't know if there's anybody watching downstairs or not. I have no idea, but there was a big drop over there. But I don't remember really that much about that time. I remember the whole shul was packed. Upstairs where the women used to sit, you know, there was mechutza, the separation of, was packed. Every nook and cranny was packed. Every closet was packed. But it's almost like a stupor. You don't know what's happening.
What happened next?
Next, we went to the railroad station. I remember the march very well. This whole column walking the main street to the railroad station. And then being loaded into cattle cars. A train, but only for a short ride to Ungvár, where we were unloaded at a called the Tegeladjar, which is a brick factory. that was a collection point from other places. Not only Bereznyy, but up and down the line from Bereznyy to the border, and maybe from other places. I don't know where all they come from. My wife was there. That's what I didn't know it then, but she was in the same place.
How long were you there?
Here again, I can't tell exactly. There might be some people who would know exactly how long we were there, but I would say weeks.
Weeks?
Yeah.
Were you fed?
We had to fend for ourselves. I was isolated immediately. Me and my sister were taking what they called the 7th barrack, number 7. We were supposed to be very dangerous people to the regime. Probably somebody denounced us or somebody. But my sister and I were taken in an isolated barrack, but we couldn't leave the barrack. Everybody else had the run of the whole place, which was a huge place. It was a big place. It was a big factory. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 acres, I don't know. But me and my sister were put in a barrack. It was number 7 barrack. And the only thing we had is room for a blanket and a concrete floor, just for one to lay down. And we were giving food once a day, but I remember this sick brother once came. Oh, they were living. I did manage to get out one time and watched where my mother and the rest of them were. They were in a lean-to in near the brick kilns. And they brought some food with them, of course. And I remember my mother. That was the last time I saw my mother. It's the last time. And about 4 hours later, my brother comes, the sick one, brings a bowl of soup. And it was bread in it, already soaked and boiled into it. And I picked up the bread. I'll never forget his look. And the bread had, what do you call, mildew on it. And I looked at it. He looks at me and he gave me like a sheepish grin, you know, like, that's all we have. I'll never forget that. I just went and ate it, you know. Little did I know then that it was penicillin. So, I've never seen anybody after that. The next day, I think, this barrack was put on the train first. I have no idea whether the rest of the family was on the same train or on a later train, but this barrack was taken out first. My sister and I.
And another cattle car.
Another cattle car.
What do you remember about that trip?
Oh, I remember that one very well. Oh, I remember that one. I remember there was no room to breathe. There was no room to take a leak. There was a bucket someplace, but you had to make your way through it. There was no way you could do it unless you want to step over people. People didn't even have room to lie down, standing up. But I was in a corner, me and my sister, and I had a little pouch of tobacco. I had food. I don't remember where I got the food, but I had some food with me. But I hoarded it. We didn't need it. I didn't want to smoke because I wanted to save it. I had a knife with me, and I started digging on the floor. Make a hole to escape. And I told my sister, I says, we're going to go. I don't know where we're going. I don't like it. We're going. Well, where are we going? I don't know, but we got to get out of here.
Had you ever heard of Auschwitz?
No way. No. Never heard of it.
So you were going to dig through the floor?
I did. I dug through the floor. I took out a pretty big enough board. And it was right over the wheel. Right over the wheel. In fact, for the rest of the night, until we arrived, I had about 3 or 4 square feet less space too, because the way it was dug out, I couldn't put the board back in. They would have had no place to, my sitting place.
What did people do for...
There were dead people in the car already. I don't know how many, I know there were half a dozen or more dead people, old people who died. It was a 5-day, 6-day journey. 4 or 5 or 6, I don't remember. It was night after night. And children, everybody, children, families together over there.
What did people do for a latrine?
Right under them, under themselves.
Where they were standing?
Yeah. Yeah, I did it. Right under where they were standing. It was just packed, stench. I at least was fortunate that, you know, where we were was the window right on top over there. Sometimes I could get up over there and stick my nose through and see. But
when the doors opened, what do you remember?
It was it's very, very hazy. Very hazy. I don't even remember the moment I separated from my sister. Once the doors opened, there was just lows, and hitting, and chasing, and everything. And I can't remember really any particular, except being in a mess and not knowing what I'm doing, where I'm going. All of a sudden, I'm at a column. I can't tell you that I remember Mengele showing me this way or somebody else. I don't remember that thing. You see? I don't remember that. I remember winding up in a barrack, getting close. I remember going through the clothesline and getting the striped clothes and getting rid of everything. I remember that. I kept my shoes. They let me keep my shoes for a while. I remember that.
Were you shaved?
Yeah, oh yeah, shaved and splashed underneath here, splashed underneath here, splashed here, you know, to delousing and stuff like that. I remember that.
Were you tattooed?
I remember the tattooing. It was the next day. Yeah.
What did you think was happening to you?
I didn't know. This is from then on, it was that very same night, we were put in a column in march to Birkenau from Auschwitz. And the only thing I remember from that march is that it was a freezing drizzle. And my clothes froze on me. And all I had was just the striped thing, nothing underneath. And I could hardly move my pants because the things froze. And I was so cold that I didn't think that I will survive that march. I was so cold, I didn't care what was going to happen to me. I don't remember how it thawed out. We were put into a barrack. That's where we were put into those barracks where they had all those, we slept 8 to a tier, you know, 3 tiers, 8 or 10 people. But I was so cold that night, I was frozen. I couldn't move my legs because the pants, the rain, froze on me. That I remember very distinctly. But I don't remember thinking, why me? I don't remember that. Later on, perhaps. I was just trying to, I guess, to take one step at a time to see what I make it to the next one.
Were you beaten?
Oh, yes.
That day?
That day, yeah. If you didn't walk fast enough, they were all around you and just smacked you all over. But you didn't feel it because you were frozen. Oh, yeah, I remember being beaten. Beaten over the head, beaten on the back, beaten every place. Because you couldn't move fast enough.
What do you remember about the barracks?
I remember the three-tiered, huge bunks where 10 people slept. And most of the times you could sleep sideways because there was not enough room to lie on your shoulder. And then lining up for soup once a day. And we never had soup as good as in Birkenau, because the soup was made from all these food leftovers that we brought. It was great soup. You could get all you want. I remember that in Birkenau.
Did you pray when you were there?
No. Never occurred to me.
What were you thinking about in terms of your religious experience?
I don't know if I was thinking about my religious experience. It's a very, I've never even thought about it until now, of what I was thinking. I don't know if I thought about religion at all. Not in a positive way, anyway. I remember roast. Oh yeah, I remember being beaten. Beaten over the head, beaten on the back, beaten every place. Because we couldn't move fast enough.
What do you remember about the barracks?
I remember the three-tiered, huge bunks where 10 people slept. And most of the times you could sleep sideways because there was not enough room to lie on your shoulder. And then lining up for soup once a day. And we never had soup as good as in Birkenau, because the soup was made from all these food leftovers that we brought. It was great soup. You could get all you want. I remember that in Birkenau.
Did you pray when you were there?
No. Never occurred to me.
What were you thinking about in terms of your religious experience?
I don't know if I was thinking about my religious experience. It's a very, I've never even thought about it until now, of what I was thinking. I don't know if I thought about religion at all. Not in a positive way, anyway. I remember when I was finally finagled myself a trip to the basement, to the cellar, to where they were processing vegetables and stuff like that. And I met this Frenchman, and he was saying something about God will help us, and I made a very derogatory remark about God. What God? Where God? And he proceeded to beat the hell out of me. He says, it's God who's going to get you out of here. Big Frenchman. Remember his face. He beat me. He says, don't you blaspheme God here. Then he went and started singing. I think he must have been an opera singer. I don't know his name. And he went and started singing a song called Je t'endrai. I still didn't know what it means. But that I ate a lot. I ate onions, I ate carrots, I ate radishes in that basement. So maybe he was right. Maybe God did send me over there at that time to get a little more energy. But at that time, I didn't. In fact, if you want to know the truth, even after I got liberated, at best, My might not call me an atheist, I was an agnostic because of that.
Are you still?
No.
Why?
Well, I got over it. I think the kids started me back first because I realized that no matter how I feel, I cannot leave that legacy to my children. So, but you know who's most responsible for it? My wife. No, not at all. It all came back to me. All what I learned in the yeshiva and everything else, it came back to me. It came back to me and it's back with me, and I'm glad of it.
How long were you in Birkenau?
I think maybe about 2-3 months.
And then where did you go?
And then they just told me to go, and we went to Jaworzno. It was a satellite camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau. It belonged to that same group. It was a camp that there were two workforces. One worked in the coal mines, and one worked in building a huge underground power plant.
Do you know the company you worked for?
IG Farben.
So there were civilian...
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was IG Farben. I don't know. I worked in the coal mines, too, but not for too long. Which was the better job in the coal mines. It's a little more food for those who went in the coal mines. But I couldn't finagle to stay there long enough. I was put in a IG Farben. There was a big, huge excavation. It must have been 60 to 80 feet deep and running for acres and acres. And at first, I was what they call an Eisenbieger. I worked at a station where I bent the reinforcing steel that goes into the concrete. They had a template, you know, the steel went in, and you put a piece of pipe over it, bend it here, and then you had to go here, bend it back this way. I did that. And then I was transferred to what you might call a cushy job. I was supervising pumps in the deepest pit of this excavation that pumped out the underground water to keep it dry. And that's where I almost lost my life.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was a kind of an isolated job. All I had to do is watch the pumps, and I fell asleep once. Now, you got to remember, at noon, we started work at 4:30 in the morning, and at 1 o'clock, the siren sounded, and everybody had to assemble in their own groups, and the groups marched off to the assembly line, assembly place, Appellplatz, the work Appellplatz. And over there, everybody was counted. And when everybody was accounted for, then Captain Einsagen and the chain of guards were pulled in, and then a small contingent was guarding the small area. But not until everybody was accounted for from each group were the others pulled in. So one time I fell asleep, and the groups fell into place, and they march up there, and they count them over there, and one missing. So when one is missing, what they do, they make everybody fall out again into their own groups. That way they know who's missing. So they count the groups, and everybody's group is counted. The one will have one part missing, they know what to look for. Well, I was the missee. I remember somebody came right back and just woke me up with a bang on my head. It made me run back to the place. Over there I was put into one of those where they lash you down And I got, I don't know how many, 20, 30, 40 lashes. And they put me for the next afternoon to what is called the Strafkommando. Not that the other work wasn't hard enough, but this work was designed to, people couldn't last there for a couple of hours. It consisted of unloading cement from railroad cars, taking a cement sack on your shoulder. You had to run with it for probably like 500 yards, only running. You cannot slow down. During the whole course, there were SS and capos hitting you. Nobody lasted more than 2 hours. It was just that terrible speed. You didn't have any stamina. You know, you were undernourished. You can't do that. And I did that, I don't know, I don't remember whether I did an hour or two, but finally I was pulled off. And my boss, a German civilian, his name was Sanders. He was an engineer, a German engineer who was in charge of this particular pumping station and other equipment. But I don't know, until that moment, I didn't even know he cared that much. I didn't know that. He was very nice, was always civilized. And I remember how he looks like, exactly. Drawn face, with his German type of a hat. And you're talking about blue jeans, you know, the denim that they make blue jeans. He had a jacket like that then. And apparently he was standing over there. He says, "Turek, go back to your place." I was half dead then. But if they would have taken me away, then I would have never come back.
You think he saved your life?
Yes, he did. No question about it. Absolutely. But he said, "Zurich," and he didn't take, you know, even if I couldn't. In other words, he told me, "You got to make it back over there if you're going to the hospital," which I knew. So back I went, and I didn't see him the rest of that day. I managed to get back to the camp that night in the march. And the next day he brought me, for the next few days, a slice of bread that had, I don't know what, might have had margarine underneath or not, but it had almost a quarter-inch of sugar over it. For the next 2-3 days.
So he allowed you to recover?
Recover over there, yeah. Yeah.
This was an IG Farben employee?
I don't know. He must have been. I don't know whether he was an IG Farben employee or he was a subcontractor. I don't know. His name was Sanders.
Okay, let's continue this in a minute. You stop? Is it possible to start another tape?
Start another tape?
Yeah.
Can they start another tape?
Because this is an appropriate place to just go for the last